Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we've watched a movie on Mubi.
Yes.
Agnès Varda, who I've only seen one film by before.
I'm a huge admirer.
I know you love her. And obviously she's a key figure in the French New Wave.
Yes, she was the only woman, really.
Yeah, and Celia, who's been on the podcast before and we've spoken about a lot, a friend of ours, I think really identifies with Agnès Varda because Celia did a Masters at Warwick in film, and I think she really identifies with being the one woman who's surrounded by guys who are all showing off about the films they know, and, and she's sort of a little bit resistant to that. And Agnès Varda, I think this came up on Facebook recently, Agnès Varda supposedly had only seen one movie or 20 movies or something.
I don't believe that.
Yeah, people were saying, and Celia in fact was saying she didn't really believe that, and it was more a kind of saying, well, that's what all these guys are like. I'm just going to not make it a key thing about me, that my thing is that I'm a nerd about these movies.
I mean, she made a film independently in her 20s.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to be into film.
So you have to be into film to make a film, in your 20s. I mean, admittedly, she'd been a photographer beforehand and a very famous photographer. She worked with that big agency. But nonetheless, you don't make a film unless you're interested in cinema.
Yeah, absolutely. And the film we've seen today is a 1976 documentary called Daguerréotypes.
Yes.
In English, we would say Daguerréotypes.
Uh-huh.
The film is set on the street where Agnès Varda lived. Yes. She made this film there because she was looking after a 2-year-old son. She couldn't really go very far because of him. So she made a documentary about the people on her street, the shops they ran, who they were, that kind of thing. Life on the street. It's a kind of relaxed anthropological study. It reminded me actually of Être et Voir, which was 2002.
Uh-huh.
You know, the kind of that like I say, that relaxed feeling of just watching these people to go about their day.
Yeah, it's a film about her neighbours, and it's deceptive because actually in one of her later documentaries, she talks about how they had a generator in her house, but they basically had to plug in all the cords for the cameras and the sound and everything from her house. Yeah, and they could only go as far as,
I think I read 90 metres.
Yeah, as the roll of wire.
So the whole film takes place within a 90-metre radius of
her house. Yeah. And I loved it. I mean, so I think at this point, I am, I don't know, maybe critically unreliable in relation to, or not objective in relation to Agnès Varda, because to watch one of these documentaries is just like to be in her company in a way, right? And to kind of, bask in her sensibility and her kindness and her gentleness and her ability to get people to talk about themselves and her respect for ordinary people, and I just like it, right? So it's almost like she could be doing any subject and I would be interested. And she gives all of them form, really. So here, a magic act in the neighborhood becomes, what brings all of these different characters in the neighborhood together. Yeah, they go watch the show, but actually through the magician's performance, you reconnect to all of these shopkeepers.
Yeah, and through some sort of match cuts as well, effectively. It's sometimes with dialogue and sometimes with image. You've got the magician saying, just tilt your head back, and you see the guy tilting his head back, and that's the hairdresser, and then you cut to him in his barbershop tilting someone's head back, and it's the way to link that to that. And the thing about folding the trick head thing, so he's got a box on someone's head that he's put all these knives into, and obviously they're not injured, but he folds his flaps out so you can see that there's no head in there, and as he does all this, you cut to someone folding flaps on a box that they're packing something in to give it to someone, in the shop. She does that a bit, and that's kind of cute, I suppose, these little match cuts that take you from one place to the other. I did think that the magician thing was a little neat, in that kind of, you see this whole portrait of this life on this street, and all these people running these shops and what they're like, and you get these portraits. It's interesting, the title of the film is this pun. So daguerreotypes they were the first publicly available form of photography.
Yes.
In the 1840s. And they were only around for about 20 years before kind of better processes came along. But you would see with them like a lot of portraiture or kind of images taken of streets, buildings, things like that. And you get that sense here, right?
Yes.
So the reason it's a pun is that the road is Rue Daguerre, and in fact it is named after Louis Daguerre, who was the creator of the...
So these are types on Daguerre Street, or Daguerre Street types.
Yeah, as well as Daguerreotypes. And you do get this really kind of rich, lovely portrait of what they're like, and she asks them questions at certain times as well. So it's not just observation, but it's also direct address, and they address the camera. And she's asked them things like, "Where'd you come from? How did you get here?" And the answers are interesting. The answers are, they certainly don't all come from Paris.
Actually, that's one of the most fascinating things about the film.
Yeah.
That in 1975, most of these people came from other parts of France. But you could already see, the beginnings of an external migration into Paris, because, some of the most recent people who have moved to Daguerre Street have moved in from Africa. Yeah.
Yeah, Algeria, and also I think Eastern Europe as well.
Ah, yes.
But yeah, a lot of them are from just the countryside, and all these people have migrated, moved to Paris, and you kind of think, well, it's in search of what, and maybe it's purpose, maybe, certainly it's money, part of it. There's opportunity in the city, and there's an interesting. It's almost like a tragic thing, I feel, where you've moved for the opportunity, and there's a sense of adventure in movement. And then you kind of get stuck there. You get these people who've been there for 40 years doing the same thing.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because, one of the things that maybe we now see in a different way is just how hard life was in the country. So, the butcher's wife, the baker's wife, talks about how proud she is to be a baker's wife, right? So I think maybe to our eyes, this kind of labor, which is the labor and, this running of these little shops with all the work that entails, is seen as like a hard life and a repetitive life. But, see it in context, yeah? I mean, these are the petit bourgeois of the place. I mean, they're the ones who own the shops. Yeah. It's not the street people or the people working in factories who, don't have a shop, yeah? So, I mean, they are relative, on a certain scale, they're a little bit above, yeah.
Yeah. But when you get to the end and the film wraps up, again, I think kind of quite neatly with this question that she's asked them of, what do you dream about? What do you dream? She's asked them, you see the answers. And you get the driving instructor talks about, sometimes I dream that I'm really rich, But everyone else is...
Dreams about work.
Yeah, they dream about work, they dream about their day. It's sort of quite limited. And you get a couple which are almost disturbing in the kind of, the guy sleepwalks down 3 flights of stairs to the road, like this feeling of wanting to escape. It starts off with the perfumier's wife. So they're the oldest couple, and they've been there since 1933.
I found them so touching.
And she clearly is in the some stages of dementia.
Yeah.
She hardly has anything to say. The conversation is directed towards him, and he runs the shop. She just kind of stands around the place and looks wistfully out the window. And then there's this thing about when it comes to the evening time, she wants to leave the shop. She doesn't go anywhere. She just wants to leave. This feeling of wanting to escape, which is evoked through a couple of the other things that you then hear about people's dreams. So that's where I get this kind of tragic sense from,
Well, that's also where you get just a sense of life, because, I mean, I could say it's the same about my life. I mean, most of my dreams are about work, and, you wake up feeling you've forgotten something, or you missed something, or you made a mistake somewhere, or, I wish I could be dreaming of adventure and romance and whatever, but most of the time it is like their dreams. And actually, that is why I find so beautiful about, Agnès Varda, right? First of all, that she asks the question, or that she has the magician there, which some people find just a bit too precious.
Well, that's where I was going earlier when I
know, yeah. That's why I'm picking up on that. And I like that about her, it's, because she kind of brings, art and imagination and a different kind of, perspective, to kind of looking at it. And in that sense, I think also ennobles these people's lives, right? Because, their life is not without magic and fun. I mean, the only time we see them laugh at all is really in that magic show. And then we see them laugh collectively as a community. So it might be junk and it might be like, you know, a precious idea or whatever, but you know, he was the visiting entertainment. She gets them all collectively, and that is that moment of joy, really, that you see in the film. So, you know, her preciousness or her eccentricity, her way of asking questions about art and romance and things that are people just think, oh, that's a bit silly or whatever. But actually they bring out something human, that kind of acts as a glue to everything else, I think.
Yeah. The baker's wife's full of laughs. She's a laugh riot. She loves it.
Yeah, she loves showing her gold teeth.
She does. She has a right good laugh. But yeah, you're right. It's a little. There's something a little subdued. I really like seeing. You know, there's a couple of people. The hairdresser has this way. He's so aware of the camera, and obviously when he's talking to the camera, it's right there. But he has this kind of. It's a very affected pose he has, you know, trying to look sort of, I don't know if it's cool or casual he's trying to go for, but he doesn't look either, you know, because he's so noticing the camera and trying to be the right thing for it, which is quite, I was quite affectionate towards that.
I was quite affectionate to all of them, actually, and that's an affection. That's Agnès Varda's great skill, because I think you feel affectionate towards all of them. And she captures, you know, lovely things, almost unaware or imperceptible. So, for example, I really loved the couple, the wife who has dementia and who barely speaks and who wants to escape at night. You know, the husband has like this really gentle, optimistic, like smile. Yeah, like he always, you know, goes to everything with a smile. Yeah. And there's a kind of a hopefulness about him. Yeah. So you don't think, oh, your life must be so horrible and such a burden, and you know, because it becomes clear after a while the reason why his wife is with him all day is so he can look after her. Yeah, they obviously don't have a pension or they don't have enough to retire on. So she's got to be there even though she's an encumbrance, and she makes customers uncomfortable. Right, when the two women came in to buy the makeup, you know, she's touching the young girl's coat behind her back, and Yeah, it was almost like a horror film at that point. It was quite creepy. So you see a lot of love is expressed through, you know, through it. Yeah, I love that, actually. And how about the talking head sections when they become interviewees and speak to us? It's so interesting, right? Because I was thinking from the beginning about the gender issue, right? Because usually when you see documentaries, and I'm grossly generalizing here, right? But, you know, they're always about important, significant, historic, world-shaking events, right? It's hard to think about it, you know, a film about a neighborhood that's done by a man. I'm sure you could find examples. But it's harder still to find a film about the neighborhood that it just features your local shops. Yeah, your local shopkeepers, really. You know, and in which, I don't know if you noticed, but the women always work in the shop. So the wife is always working in the shop with the husband, right? If he's doing the butchering, she's taking the cash. Yeah, it's always like a couple. The only exception is the perfumier, really, because she can't really... But she's there. But she's there. Yeah. So that's the first thing that caught my eye. And then there's also the questions she asked, which again, you know, it's impossible to generalize about these things, but my intuition is that, you know, only Agnès Varda asks these questions. You can imagine another documentary in which the first question would be, when did you set up business? When did you come to the street? Yeah. Whereas this one is, first, where are you from? And then, when, you know, how did you meet? Yeah. When did you fall in love? Yeah, it's hard for me to think of a male documentarian who begins to ask a question on a neighborhood about when did you fall in love. Yeah. You know, because the film is not about couples. It's, I mean, it ends up being, in a way, about the couples, as you know, the couples are the shops are the street. So you can see how all of those things come together. But there's a different accent in the questions. Yeah, the questions are skewed in a different way that reveal something else. And I think, again, you know, Agnès Varda does it. You rarely see it in other documentaries by other people. And sorry, this thing about the portraits, I love them, right? Even to the end of the credits, where each of them is posed against a shop. In silence. in silence, and she lets the film run almost a bit too long. You really get to look at them. So the pictures are posed, as for a picture rather than a film. They're posed. You can see that, she's got them carrying, elements that connect to their trade or something, right? They're posed, they're beautifully composed, and then they're brought to life by time and length, by the cinematic, something that's cinematic and not just photographic, So I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah, and the film also has that thing that we often talk about when we speak about foreign cinema, which is learning about another place and another time, and it really is a portrait that encapsulates something very specific about maybe not all of Paris, maybe not all of France, this bit of Paris in this bit of France at this time. This is her street, this is what it was like, and just the way that people live. I mean, you made a comment that the one guy buys something in pounds.
Yes.
As opposed to kilos, which you would expect, because France was like the really drove the metric system in, I think, the 1800s.
I loved all of that because, I was 13 years old in 1975. So, and obviously this is a completely different country and so on. But there were things that I remembered from my childhood. I mean, having all your shopping put in a paper bag, right? Going to buy buttons. Who goes to buy buttons? Right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And those shops, the way that things were tied up in the shops. Also, the length of time it took to shop, right? Like, you go to the butcher, you have to wait in line, then the butcher has to do your chops. He's cutting them there on the spot. But of course, there's a plus to that, because then, they arrange the shop properly to be cooked. Yeah. Cutting all the fat in particular places.
Butcher. I love watching a butcher at work.
Yeah. Yes, it was wonderful to see. I noticed also that, because I keep thinking, Madrid was so dirty in the 70s. And then you realize, well, Paris too. I mean, maybe that was a thing just about, new inventions of street cleaning or upkeep or, new methods, because the streets were dirtier. I also noticed, for example, that nobody has those brooms anymore. Yeah, so they're kind of brooms made of bushes. Yeah, where you sweep the outside. And of course, what do? You sweep right in front of your house or your shop, and you throw it in the gutter, right?
Yeah.
So, then it's the city's business, but the sidewalk is your business, right? And so everybody's seen sweeping, their shop front. And it made me think that you don't see brooms like that anymore. I mean, I don't know when was the last time I've seen a broom like that.
I don't know. When's the last time you've been on a street like that with all local shops?
Exactly.
I mean, this is the thing that occurs to me whenever, and it's true of this, and it's true of, I think about like the, I don't know, sketches from the Two Ronnies, things like that you set in these shops. And the thing that always occurs to me as someone who really didn't grow up in amongst those shops, is how nothing is branded. You don't buy brands. You just go, I'll just have, give me 3 buttons.
Yes.
Not 3 of these buttons or whatever,
Yes.
You see brands, I suppose, in the cheesemonger, there are cheeses that they've bought in from wherever, and you see a few perfumes, but actually the perfumes mostly are, I'll have, rose water, or I'll have violet water, and he just gets it out, because he's been making it.
Yes.
Gets it out of a big jar and dispenses it into another
choose
jar.
your bottle.
Yeah, exactly. That's something that is, it's actually alien to me, frankly. It's never been, that's not the world I grew up in.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it is the world I grew up in. I mean, you would go buy chickpeas or chops or rice or whatever. You didn't go buy this brand of rice or that brand of rice. You bought this type of rice or that type of rice, but it wasn't branded. And also what you notice is there's no packaging. I mean, there was, when they go buy the bread, you get a little bit of wax paper to hold it. And in some instances, not even, right? And everybody brings their own shopping bags, yeah? So it speaks to a lost world, and it is a document of that world. It's a kind of a gentle and perceptive and loving document. I think what I love most about Agnès Varda's documentaries is their modesty, their playfulness, and the respect she shows for her subjects. She never looks down or talks down or to the subject at all. You get the feeling that like she treats them as her, as her equal. Yeah.
You should be a fool not to. I mean, they're her neighbours.
Well, I know, but
I know what you mean.
Not everyone. Well, very few people do, in fact.
Yeah, I don't even know my neighbours.
Say nothing. But anyway, it's a beautiful film, and it's on Mubi, and it's part of a whole series of documentaries that are in fact very hard to find, because I went through an Agnès Varda phase about 2 or 3 years ago, where I tried to look at all her films in chronological order. And obviously I was able to see the big features, Le Bonheur, Cléo de Saint-Cassette, La Pointe...
La Pointe Courte.
La Pointe Courte, and Vagabond. But the documentaries were hard to find, yeah? And this is one that I haven't seen, and that it was lovely to see.
The only one of those I've seen before is Claire from 5 to 7, which I think you showed us at university, which I loved. It's terrific. But no, this is only the second. And she was working up until her death a couple of years ago. She was 90.
And getting more and more renowned, because actually, so when I was saying that her documentaries are hard to find, I mean, except the most recent ones, yeah? The Beaches of Agnès and Faces, Places, those got a very wide distribution. But these 70s ones, were very difficult to see.
And wasn't she on some tour in the years just preceding her death when she was going around the world with a cat or something? There was a thing about having a cat on her shoulder. So she'd become like an increasingly recognised figure. Yes. And her importance had become increasingly recognised.
Yes. So she moved from photography, became a filmmaker. She never stopped being a photographer. In fact, her film on Cuba is a film made of photographs, very beautiful. And latterly she became like an artist, yeah? So she did installations and things like that, conceptual art, and, she worked with various people. So, she was someone who was kind of curious and creative until she died. She's amazing.
Yeah.
And you can, see why in a very modest way in this wonderful film.
Yeah.
So, highly recommended, and I'm definitely going to be looking at some of the other Varda films on Mubi. So, we are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.